In 1899, the U.S. made legal history when the world's first juvenile court opened in Chicago. The court was founded on two basic principles. First, juveniles lacked the maturity to take responsibility for their actions the way adults could. Second, because their character was not yet fully developed, they could be rehabilitated more successfully than adult criminals. More than a century later, these principles remain the benchmarks of juvenile justice in the United States. In Colorado, Governor Bill Ritter, a former district attorney, recently formed a juvenile clemency board to hear cases of kids convicted as adults. The head of the 7-member panel says it's an acknowledgement that teens are still developing and different from adults, a point made in the 2005 U.S. Supreme Court decision that outlawed the death penalty for crimes committed as juveniles. In Illinois, a proposal to move 17-year-olds charged with misdemeanors to juvenile court passed in the state Senate and is pending in the House. In 2005, the state repealed the automatic transfer of kids to adult court for drug violation within 1,000 feet of public housing or schools.
So, is the Attorney General right? Are we seeing a, quote, plague of teen violence? And if so, what is feeding it? Let's talk with Wendy Walsh now. She's a psychologist in Los Angeles. Thank you, Dr. Wendy Walsh, for joining us here today.
Thank you.
So the Attorney General says it is a plague. We're not sure what the exact numbers are. We'd have to do a lot more studying, and I'm not sure if officials know exactly, you know, if it's a trend or if we're just hearing more about it. But why do you think this is all going on?
Yeah, we have to be careful for sure to use the words trend and plague because it's just that the media is bigger than ever, so we are getting to hear a lot about these incidents. But let's talk about what's behind these incidents. We're talking about teens that don't seem to have a lot of compassion or empathy for their fellow teens and are acting out in a way. And, you know, I think there are big cultural trends that have led to this. You know, I like to say that feminism got in bed with capitalism and gave birth to consumerism, which means that parents are off working, so who's raising the kids?
Hey, you bring up a very good point, because I had a panel. We're doing a special this weekend called, you know, Black Men in the Age of Obama. We talked about parents being in the home, and that was an issue for African-American families. And one woman said during that panel, well, it was a rise of feminism because it took women out of the home, and she goes, I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's the truth. So you're speaking to that as well. Why do you say that?
Absolutely. I think that feminism was a fabulous thing because it liberated masculine energy in women and gave us a little bit of parity on the economic playing field, but it did a bit of a disservice to both our love lives and our families, because last week Time Magazine's poll on women said that less than 30% of kids in America today have a parent at home, whereas in 1975 virtually all kids did. And yet 65% of Americans think that is a negative. Well, what are they doing about it? You know?
Well, here's the thing. It seems like what you're saying is that it's really home training. It starts in the home when you say all this. So at the very bottom line here, at the base, is it what is taught in the home?
I think that no matter what we try to teach our children, the truth is the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. So the way to parent well and to teach compassion and ethics and morals is to be a moral person yourself. Okay? That's important.
Teen peer pressure is the influence that children that are the same age or near the same age have on each other. Peer pressure can be both good and bad depending on what group of kids your child is in. Troubled teens that are involved in gang members, drug and alcohol will create bad peer pressure, while well-adjusted children with families that are involved in sports and other activities can be good. Although peer pressure is not always negative, it can have dire consequences when that pressure leads to violence. When teens act violently, an audience often fuels their behavior, whether they are performing for a small group of friends or in a crowded school hallway. the element of being watched may play into their hostile behavior.
Watching Charter's Local Edition. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Brad Pomerantz, and our guest is Professor Ellen Wartella. She is with the University of California at Riverside, and you are an expert in an area near and dear to my heart. I have a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old. They love watching television, and you're looking at the media's influence on children's development. What are you finding?
Well, the media are quite influential, is what we find.
Yes.
I think the most important thing for parents, what we need to tell parents, is that you should watch the amount of time that your children spend in front of the screen media. American Academy of Pediatrics recommends about 2 hours a day for kids over 2.
And that means media is television,
right?
Is internet,
computers, that's right.
Video games,
that's right.
So 2 hours total.
Of screen media.
That seems actually high to me.
Well, on average, children spend more time than that. They spend over 2.5, 3 hours.
To me, that's unacceptable.
Children under 6.
It's
I
just
agree.
unacceptable.
It's a lot of time.
But I can tell you, as the father of a 5- and a 7-year-old, it's quite a challenge.
It is a challenge. The other thing that you need to do is watch what they watch too, and to make sure that the content is appropriate for them. I'm a firm believer of the school that says it's not just the amount of time that you spend, it's what you're watching that matters.
The prefrontal cortex of the brain, which is not fully developed until the early 20s, undergoes a considerable development during adolescence. The prefrontal cortex allows people to think, evaluate, and make complex judgments in a uniquely human way. The brain of a juvenile is not fully developed to make the proper judgments, thus leading them, at times, to delinquent lifestyles. Also, the lack of full brain development does not allow juveniles to understand the law or represent themselves in an adult courtroom. Pros. Trying teens as adults for their crimes and sentencing them to the same punishments as adults could be a deterrent to their committing crimes. Children with records and past rehabilitations have already shown that the juvenile system is of no effect to them. The adult system could provide stronger punishment. Cons. Juveniles are not capable of the same understanding and meaningful participation in his or her defense. The primary goal of the juvenile system is to rehabilitate and treat, whereas the goal of the criminal system is to give punishment proportional to the crime. Putting young offenders in adult prisons only leads to more crime, higher prison costs, and increased violence. In conclusion, there are few adults that will admit that juveniles are equal to them in any respect other than the right to life. Juveniles are not given the privileges to do adult things like drink and smoke. They do not have to pay adult bills. Their mothers and fathers are supposed to financially support them. Thus, since juveniles are not equal to adults in society, they have no basis to be tried and punished as adults.